I'm Toby. This is Theo. Hi, Theo.
Hi, Toby.
It's been quite the week in British politics, hasn't it?
It really has. The first week worth paying attention to in a while, in my opinion.
And the week that I think it's safe to say kicked off the sort of 12-month sprint, potentially, to the general election.
Yeah, I'd say the last kind of week we had like this in terms of preceding a general election was probably when Theresa May's Brexit deals were continually getting vetoed and the process that started.
Yeah, and there's been loads of talk. I think maybe we'll do a little bit of speculation about the date of the election, because there's been a lot of that. But, of course, the main event...
Speculation.
Ooh, speculation. The main event, of course, is Tory party conference. It's the first time in years that it's been held before Labour. I don't know if that's symbolic of anything. Theo, if you had to describe Tory conference this year in five words, how would you describe it?
5 words in a sentence or just 5 adjectives?
5 adjectives.
Gloomy, pessimistic, defeated, lost, frustrated.
Okay, I'll go with radicalized, fatalistic, disparate, because there's a lot of disparate tribes. And I'm also going to put in there failing, and I'm also going to put in there delusional, because I think there's quite a lot of copium going on.
I think all of it can be summed up within those 10 words that we've put together.
Your one was really good. Lost. It's kind of like what you just did is like when you ask people to describe the Conservative Party in a focus group, those are the words that normally come up. It's like lost, hopeless, failing.
And I'm not even talking focus groups of voters. I'm talking Conservative members being interviewed at the conference.
Yeah, they're not happy, are they? I mean, most of them seem to just be like, "Oh, we know we're going to lose, but wasn't that a great speech from the Home Secretary?" That's kind of, whenever you see Vox Pops, that was kind of it, really.
Pretty much.
Let's start with, do you want to start with the offshoots, or do you want to start with the main stage?
Let's start with the offshoots, just work our way through them.
Okay, so Liz Truss, Rally for Growth. She's there. A lot of people kind of there, very fascinated by what was going on. She seemed to have, this is what I noticed, the energy in the party is with the faction that won the leadership election last year. The energy of the party was not with the government. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like a weaker, less momentous version of kind of Trump's presence in the Republican Party at the moment. You know, still there, still lurking around. Obviously, this is a kind of hard right faction that split off, and it honestly just symbols more problems in the Tory party. But in terms of an electoral victory for the Conservatives, I don't think it makes any difference.
See, the thing about this is these sort of offshoots, you had Nigel Farage, you have all these sort of culture war people. I'm finding it interesting how Liz Truss seems to be aligning herself with them, because the culture war sort of Farage type people, the Faragistas, they believe in the really hardcore immigration stuff, but they also believe in like some social democratic policies, like really harsh on the border, and then like families and like maybe some social spending. So I don't know why Liz Truss is aligned with that faction. Why are they all grouped together? That doesn't really make sense to me.
I would probably put it down to the fact that Liz Truss knows she's never going to get anyone on her side with economics again. So she's just mini budget.
She's aligning with
mini budget.
She's aligning with the culture warriors. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. Any speck of relevance or success in politics she's ever going to have again is going to be in the culture war sphere, not in the I'm the prime minister that fixed the economy, because she didn't fix the economy, did she? Whatever she did to the economy, it wasn't fixed. I'm sure we can all agree with that. No matter what your persuasion is, we can agree with that. So anything Liz Truss is going to achieve is going to be culture war related.
Even the IEA agrees that the Liz Truss project failed, so I don't think that's particularly partial. I think we can say that.
Yeah.
But I mean, she seems to think it's about the economics though, because she basically was like, we need to do like the inheritance tax. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg said cut inheritance tax and fund it by scrapping HS2. That was the big idea. Then you've got like...
Yeah, I'm not sure how the numbers work out there.
Nigel Farage was there saying Liz Truss's speech is great. This is what we need to get growth into the economy. And did you see the TV interviews through conference? It was just Tory MPs being asked about Liz Truss and looking very uncomfortable when they're asked about Liz Truss.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just something they kind of, the prime minister that lasted shorter than a lettuce. I mean, does anyone in the Tory party really want to talk about that?
The other thing that fascinated me is Nigel Farage. So he was there for GB News, but clearly the Tory party likes him. The membership would probably vote to make him leader if they could. Do you think Nigel Farage is going to move to the Conservative Party after the next general election?
I think if there is, which there is likely to be a big defeat coming. If there is a big defeat, there's going to be a big shift in their position and their direction. I think Farage could definitely have something to do with that.
Could you see
nothing's off the table?
Tory leader Nigel Farage? Do you think that's possible?
I think it's very possible. I mean, these parties always go through a long period of reorganization after a big defeat, So again, anything's possible.
So Tories are going to have their Michael Foot moment after the election and then slowly build back. Is that actually? That's a good point. Do we think it's a given that the Conservative Party is going to go much to the right in the event of a defeat? Because from what I'm seeing, it seems Sunak will be blamed, and the blame will be he was too moderate. So I'm assuming. Would you agree that they're going rightwards when they lose?
It's difficult to say, because if you think about when New Labour kicked the Tories out of office, their position was, okay, we need to go back to the centre, similar to how Labour decided that after the Thatcherists, beat them for 10 or so years. So, but honestly, I think this might be the example that breaks that pattern. They might actually go even further to the right, even though that economically, at least, is what's pushing people away, on top of just general appearance of incompetence,
Yeah, this is the thing. I wouldn't write off a populist right-wing Tory leader winning a general election. Let's say a Keir Starmer government is very unpopular. We know from America that is possible. Doesn't mean it's likely. It's entirely possible. The other thing I would say is, it's often more than one defeat before they moderate. Like, how long did it take before they went with David Cameron? How long did it take for John Smith and Blair? Because after the first Thatcher defeat, Labour went Michael Foot. The Tories had Ian Duncan Smith. So do you think maybe it's a case of they'll go to the right and it will take a second big defeat and then they'll wake up and smell the coffee? Or
I think it could easily take more than one big defeat. What's important to note, though, is that the wilderness years, as they're known for the Tory party, that time with Ian Duncan Smith,
the quiet man
Michael
turning up the volume.
Kind of leaders, that was partly to do with just being in the shadow of this insanely popular technocratic Blair government, which we were talking about this the other day. Keir Starmer doesn't have that level of charisma or energy as Blair, so the Tories might not need to spend as much time reorganizing to then take that on, but it will certainly take them time to get back to an electable position.
You make a great point, because you're dealing with generational talents in Thatcher and Blair. They're probably why they kept winning. You're right.
It's that presidential style of leadership which we've lacked in this country for a long time.
Yeah, Keir Starmer, he might be Harold Wilson, he might be John Smith. He's not Blair. He's not a. He's going to be a very normal prime minister, I think, just generic. So main stage, conference hall. Few things I noticed. Big thing I noticed is I thought at various points I was watching a Republican Party conference. Hearing the way they spoke about issues, there was a bit of conspiracism in there, stuff about 15-minute cities and stuff. Very online. Theo, has the Conservative Party gone too online?
Have they gone too online? I mean, how do you mean online?
Are they regurgitating right-wing conspiracy theories from the internet?
I will say Penny Mordaunt's speech did sound like an angry Twitter thread, or an X thread, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, it did have a very kind of warlike tone to it to open the speeches, on the main stage. So yeah, I think she definitely encapsulates what you speak of.
Suella Braverman, big speech. It seemed to go down really well. Do you think she's obviously pitching herself for the leadership? Do you think it's worth trying?
I think she could easily take the position, or she'll definitely be a strong contender in the power vacuum as the leader of the populist right, for sure. And she may be a potential competition between her and Farage for the leadership in the event of a big Tory loss next year.
Now, there's no moderate option there. I'm racking my brains as to think who the moderate option might be. James Cleverly has been mentioned. He's kind of a blank slate, so he can't be painted as too moderate. But it seems to me that whoever becomes leader, they will be pulled rightwards, even if that's not where their instincts are initially.
Yes, I think it's very likely they will elect a very right leader, because if the Tories do face a big electoral loss, the party will put it down to failures of the incumbents who are considered on the moderate wing, like Sunak. You know, he's moderate compared to the right faction. So immediately anyone associated with that will be kind of pushed out. I think it will be a hard right leader replacing them.
It will be a Liz Truss was right sort of story that they'll tell. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. You've got a lot of runners. It did feel actually like big chunks of this conference were an early leadership contest. Like they were all pitching themselves. It quieted down by the end. I mean, the fiasco through the conference of all the speculation about HS2, I think was really damaging. And the cancellation as well, only because it's not like it's the most popular infrastructure project in the world, but the big criticism from voters of the Conservatives isn't that they're corrupt or they only care about rich people. Those critiques existed in the 2019 campaign. The critique that's landing now, particularly about Sunak, isn't that he's rich. It isn't that he's out of touch, although those things land as well. The critique is the Tories can't do stuff. They can't deliver. They're not competent. And I don't know about you, I think that might be more damaging than being seen as dodgy or sleazy. Being seen as useless is like the worst thing you can be viewed as.
I mean, yeah, I think voters have always been able to put aside that kind of sleazy, dodgy, corrupt, rich people idea, simply because, you know, the Conservatives have built an image of being, well, over hundreds of years, a paternalistic group of rich people who act in the best interest of the whole country. That's the image they've built up. When you remove the competence from that, what's left in the Conservative appeal? Just sleazy, rich men making decisions on behalf of everyone else. Now they don't benefit anyone. What's the appeal? There is none.
Yeah, and you've got high immigration. You've got a bad economy. There's not really much you can say, you'll lose this if you vote Labour. And Keir Starmer gives off like reassuring bank manager vibes. So they haven't got, if you were a Tory strategist right now, what card are you playing? What should Rishi Sunak have done? Is there anything, or is it hopeless?
Honestly, if he feels in a position where he actually has to cancel HS2, again, there is really nothing for him to do, because what he wants is to project an image of pragmatism and good old-fashioned conservative level-headedness. He can't really do that when the country's in the state that it's in. So essentially, he's there attempting to convince people everything's fine when around them everything's not fine. So honestly, I think they're all out of cards. And you can see that. Clearly, they've got nothing to play, and that's why these optics are happening.
I liked Sunak's speech. On its own merits, I thought he was able to grip the attention of people. So the conference, they've not gone up in the polls afterwards, but they haven't gone down. I think if the speech had been bad, they might have sort of come out worse than they went in. I think it was the best pitch he could possibly have done. There's sort of a few traps were set for Labour in terms of, well, we're doing the HS2 thing, so what are you going to do? Because then Labour are stuck in the trap of, are they now going to say, either we're going to cancel these new infrastructure projects or we're going to borrow more money? That's sort of the classic trap.
Well, quick question for you, actually.
Okay.
So you saw Rishi Sunak's wife speak right before, obviously.
I did.
Essentially just for 20 minutes saying, he's a normal guy. He's not a rich guy who's out of touch. He's just like all of you and he cares about you. Do you think that was actually unsupervised by Sunak? Because she said at the start of the speech, Rishi Sunak doesn't know what I'm going to say. Do you believe her?
If I believe that, I also believe that Boris Johnson didn't go to any parties during lockdown.
Okay.
It's no. I'm all because I've seen they're filming that. They had a camera with him backstage, watching her go on stage and stuff. Maybe they told him an hour before or something. I could maybe believe that, but he knew when it was happening, definitely. And also, it was on the teleprompter. And during Sunak's speech, he started speaking and thanking her. And on the teleprompter, it was telling him to thank her. So,
I see.
unless he was just really good at speaking a speech he didn't know the lines to. But anyway, I thought the Sunak speech was decent. I think it wasn't particularly coherent, but he came across as more human, less robotic. It did give me slight last Gordon Brown speech in 2009, where they were kind of quite triumphant and like, it's going to be okay, we're this, we're that. And it was a values pitch as well. Do you think Sunak got, like, hit the right notes in terms of, like, trying to communicate British values, or do you think it's all noise?
I mean, I think he did a fairly good job in attempting to reach out to maybe the more cultural focused, supporters of the party to say, look, I'm kind of no nonsense about the cultural stuff. I agree with you. I'm not caught up in that, but it did kind of seem like a desperate attempt, to cover for a lot of like the HS2 and everything.
Yeah, that's the big issue, because and also he's trying to say I'm the candidate of change. And I've seen a poll from YouGov, and I will get the exact numbers for you in a minute. But something to the effect of, like, by like 8-1, people said Sunak is more of the same relative to a change. Like, people aren't buying change. Do you think it's possible for him to persuade people that he represents change more than the opposition?
I mean, I think it's difficult because, as I said before, he's obviously trying to present a kind of pragmatic, stable image while also marketing himself as a candidate of change while things change for the worse. So essentially, he's trying to play an impossible game with a lot of factors out of his control, and I just don't think he can pull it off.
Here's how the British public rate Rishi Sunak. So I've got the different stats up. His worst category is strong. He's -37 on that. Trustworthy, -29. Decisive, -26. Competent, -17. Likeable, -16. So he's doing the least bad on likability, but he's viewed as very weak. That's sort of, I think Labour kept saying that at the beginning, and it seems to have stuck. It also says here, Rishi Sunak has been trying to position himself as the candidate of change. Does he represent change or more of the same? 69% say more of the same, 13% say change. 60% of Conservative voters say more of the same. So it's an uphill battle. Most of what he announced was popular. The HS2 thing, not so much. Education was a curveball. I don't see any politics in that. Do you think that's just he believes in it, so it's something he genuinely wants to do?
You mean about upgrading educational standards? I think that's what he was talking
yeah,
about.
And like A levels are going to become like something else that I can't remember the name of.
I mean, I think that's obviously just another attempt to project change, but again, it's quite apolitical, and realistically, the educational grading. So I think also that's honestly just government administration.
Yeah,
he's part of the government. That's what he should be doing. Great.
It's a case of anything you announce, you need cross-party buy-in, right? Because there's no time on the statute book to get any of this stuff through Parliament. So the smoking sort of phased ban, that will go through because Labour also support it. Will Labour do the HS2 thing? We don't know. I guess we'll find out at conference. Whether they'll do the education change, it's probably it's in Labour's hands basically, because
I think obviously Labour do propose educational change, but it's probably in the opposite direction because I think Sunak's trying to reinforce and extend the kind of Gove reforms of the 2010s, and Labour, obviously their position is to kind of move away from that. So yeah, they both propose educational change, but definitely not the same.
Do you think Labour are quietly planning to undo a lot of like smaller things the Tories have done, just sort of under the surface once they come in?
I think they're going to, I want to say that they're trying to win on big issues, but honestly, their wins won't be on big issues. It will be on the kind of general image they present, which currently is more attractive to voters than the Tories. So yeah, I think they could easily unpick a lot of those policies.
Yeah, once a new party gets its feet under the desk, a lot changes very quickly. So it's hard to, even when it's a moderate sort of New Labour type government, immediately a load of stuff changes. Looking at conference overall, would you say success or failure for Sunak? I'd say failure, but not a terrible failure. So I guess that's victory in its own way.
I'd say he did the best he could in a downward slope towards an electoral defeat next year. He held his ground. He didn't do anything, that particularly stood out, but he's fighting an uphill battle, which he's losing. And in the long term, there was not much he can do. He took on a declining party at the end of its natural cycle of electoral success anyway. So again, just the circumstances don't bode well.
Yeah, it's not the Sunak defeat. Even if Sunak loses, it's not really the Sunak defeat. It's the Truss and the Johnson defeat, at least in my view.
It is.
And I also think, coming to the end of it, it feels longer than 13 years. It's kind of probably basically 20 years in politics because of so much stuff happening. And I also think, I think he probably comes out looking slightly better after conference, but he's been dealt an impossible hand, and he's not playing it particularly well. And at the same time, Labour just seem to be very lucky. Like, everything's going their way at the moment. And I still think Sunak is, you may disagree, I still think Sunak is probably their best electoral asset, even though he's very unpopular. I think, relative to the party, he's probably the only thing they've got going for them. But obviously that's not going to be enough when he's, like, got sort of Jeremy Corbyn level unpopularity ratings.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you said, that's not saying much within the Tory party, which again doesn't bode well for them.
So we'll look quickly at Scotland. Obviously, next podcast we'll want to look at Labour conference, which would be very interesting. I'm already hearing word about they're going to tax property developers to build more council houses. So some proper meaty Labour policies that we can look at. So Labour have achieved a 20% swing in a Scottish seat in a by-election. They look like they are... John Curtis thinks they'll get at least half the seats in Scotland next time on a much smaller swing. This obviously makes a Labour majority look much, much easier. I think every 10 seats Labour gets is like an extra 2% swing they don't need. So it makes winning a majority that much easier. Do you think this is symbolic, like a big turning point for Scottish Labour, or do you think we're overanalyzing one by-election?
The latter for sure, because looking at the data, yes, Labour win, with 17,000 votes compared to the SNP 8,000. If you just look at it at the surface, a 9,000 majority, 20% swing. But looking deeper, we have a 37% turnout compared to 2019, 66%. So a huge fall in turnout, plus the fact that the seat has swung between the SNP and Labour 4 times since 2010. So it is a swing seat. It is low turnout. It's not in the same atmosphere as a general election. So in terms of any indicators for Scottish Labour, I think not indicative of much. Obviously, the SNP have had their fair share of problems, but in terms of Labour sweeping through Scotland next election, and that being the difference between winning and losing the election overall, I think is very hard to say right now. So I would not get too excited about it.
So you're not on team it's not going to happen. You're just on team this doesn't indicate it's going to happen.
Yes.
See, I'm similar. My only caveats would be, so you've got the by-election, turnout's always lower. The fact SNP voters aren't voting with a year to go, which is what's happened, right? The fact they're not voting tells me they may be in quite a bit of trouble because, if the swing halves, it's still, 20 seats in Scotland. It may come to nothing, but it seems to be, we get it a lot less in sort of the Westminster bubble. In Scotland itself, sort of anti-SNP sentiment and constant coverage of the SNP and their problems seems to have been quite high. So I'm wondering if the SNP government is just quite damaged at the moment.
There's a few things. I think, of course, there is, given what I've said, I also think there is a chance that Labour could make a huge swing in Scotland and take a lot of seats because, of course, there's all this bad coverage about the SNP, but also the fact that I think a lot of people in Scotland may be disillusioned now with their own governmental system and the SNP because, of course, we were shown last year with the way the government attempted to did block a bill from the Scottish Parliament that kind of devolved power has its limits, and maybe they're looking away from devolution and independence towards actually a nationwide competent government. They maybe want to be more pragmatic about it, and that could mean Scottish Labour do really well because they're thinking SNP devolution hasn't got us this far. Maybe we should just go with Labour, and Scotland is heavily tilted towards Labour. So quite contrary to what I said, I think they could do really well because of that.
Yeah, I think it may also be a thing of if the SNP are no longer viewed as competent, it's like, well, they can't deliver independence right now, but Labour look like they can win, and I want to back a winner. I think there is a big psychological thing of like, Labour hasn't... When's the last time Labour looked like actual winners? If they're looking like winners right now, it might be a thing of, oh, if I vote for them, this will actually matter.
Yes, and again, I think the SNP's image of kind of virtuous, independent, I want to say martyrs, not martyrs, but representatives of
and non-corrupt,
of Scottish independent sentiment.
Holier than thou. Holier than thou. Holier than thou.
Holier than thou. Exactly. They're not well. It seems now they're not holier than thou, and also again, as I was saying, the government quite literally blocking a bill from Holyrood that it doesn't like really shows the limits of devolution and what it can do, and it may lead to people looking towards more national solutions, especially as pro-independence sentiment in Scotland falls. So again, what I was saying,
basically, and I think it'll be very interesting. We've got we'll finish on. Let's finish on general election stakes when we think the next general election will be. I'm going to be bold here, okay? In your head, do you know what you're going to say?
Not really. I think I need you to walk me through this.
Okay. Honestly. Oh, right. Okay, I'll go with my guess, and we'll see if you agree or not. So, conventional wisdom is it'll be 12 months from now, October, right? They'll leave it to, because if they do it any later, it's ridiculous, and it's like Christmas. So that this is the latest they can do it without making things worse. My theory is it may be May. The reason I think it may be May is they don't want bad local elections to happen in the run-up to a general election. General election will get their voters out and help them in the local elections. The other thing is, and this prediction could age very badly, very quickly, particularly if the polling doesn't improve. But let's say they get the 17-point Labour lead down to a 10-point Labour lead. Everything goes well. Maybe like one poll comes out that shows them ahead or something. They start feeling optimistic. They can get, let's say the Rwanda policy is approved by the courts. They're able to ship some people to Rwanda. They want to hold an election before summer when the immigration numbers shoot up again. They may think their best bet is May before a recession kicks in, when immigration is lower, when the weather's a bit better. It may be the most logical option for minimising the defeat.
I would honestly, out of the two options you presented, probably go more towards the later option because, again, I think there's nothing drastic they can do, even if that includes shipping people to Rwanda, that would massively change an election result. And they know it. I mean, again, they're not seen as doers, and I don't think they're going to be able to really shift that image. I mean, I know that there was a rumor that they wanted to wait until inflation falls below 3%, but I think obviously that's going to take time, and they'd rather have that to run the election on, with Jeremy Hunt and his economic competence, kind of image. And also, I don't think they're going to worry too much about local elections, because if you remember 2019, the Conservatives got absolutely savage in the local elections, and then we got the 2019 election. So they're not always the strongest indicator for a variety of reasons, including the people who vote in local elections compared to general elections. So I would go with probably October. I'm probably going to agree with you there.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that.
So I'm a May man, you're an October man. It's good. We've covered both dates. What do we do if it's neither of them? We both look like idiots.
They withdraw the Fixed Term Parliament Act and it's in 2027 or something.
Yeah. Or like February. Imagine a February election. You fancy a February? We can go down to Parliament in February in the freezing cold as the election result comes in. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. So we've got... I think the idea for this podcast is we're just going to keep talking, because I think the next year, and then probably beyond that, if we have a Labour government, or just any government that isn't really clearly in power, it's going to be a very fascinating, unprecedented few months and years of politics ahead. I don't think it's going to get stable anytime soon, even if Labour win. I don't know about you.
For sure. I think looking at the wider picture, there's not really a stable battleground within politics. On top of the state of the economy, the state of the country, people's views about immigration and everything, we don't have an issue like Brexit to really just concentrate the fighting. So it's just people divided over different issues under different circumstances. Again, it's messy, it's unprecedented, and it's unpredictable.
Theo, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.